Thank you. And welcome to the first meeting of the Housing Management Board for 2024. My name is Alex Marsh. I'm the independent chair of this meeting, and which brings together representatives of the council's tenants and leaseholders with councillors and officers to discuss some of the big questions about what's happening in relation to social housing in Bristol. So welcome to those who are returning, but also we've got a number of people who are with us for the first time. So I will now go around the screen just to get people to very briefly introduce them. But I think I might start with John Smith, simply to give us a sort of update on the situation around, you know, yourself covering for that the senior housing role for this meeting, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I don't mind that at all, Alex. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, I should say. My name is John Smith. I am the Executive Director for Growth and Regen. That is quite a large portfolio. It includes housing. Donald Graham, who was the Director of Housing and Landlord Services, has actually left the council. So he was on a fixed-term contract and has now left. So I'm acting at the moment as Housing Director as well, working very closely with Craig and Miles and the team, and Fiona and the team. We are out at the moment for an interim replacement. We're trying to appoint a housing director on a 6 to 12 month basis, just to get us through to the other side of the election, and we will agree with the new administration the recruitment from there on.
Thank you very much and welcome. So I will now try and run around the screen whilst everybody moves around every time they speak. So starting with Philip. You're on mute, Philip.
You're mute. Hello, my name's Philip Morris. I live in Bedminster. I'm a council tenant and have been for over 20 years.
Thank you. And then come to Ben. You appear to be not on mute, but muted, which is slightly strange.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Hi, I'm Ben. I'm the leaseholder representative for this meeting.
Thank you. Lesha?
Hi everyone, I'm Lesha Wilson, Policy and Engagement Manager for Bristol City Council Housing and Landlord Services.
Fantastic. Councillor Classic?
Hi, Sarah Classic, Councillor for Hengrove and Whitchurch Park.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, Tim Delarue, I'm the representative from the Housing Scrutiny Panel.
Thank you, Tim. Nigel? You're muted, Nigel, so you're going to press the magic button.
Sorry, I've got a new phone and I'm in trouble with it. Nigel Varley, tenant at Gilton House in Brislington.
Thank you. Christine?
Hi, it's Christine Jory here, tenant of Redfield St George.
Thank you, Christine. Councillor Reynard?
Hi everyone, Councillor Tom Renhard. I'm the Cabinet Member for Housing, Delivery and Homelessness. I've got a slightly different brief to the last time I was in one of these meetings, so I'm no longer the Cabinet Member responsible for housing services, and that's now Councillor Kai.
Thank you. Fiona?
Hello everyone, I'm Fiona Lester, Head of Housing and Estates for BCC.
Thanks very much. Miles?
Thank you. Miles Tilling, Head of Business Development for Housing and Landlord Services at Bristol City Council.
Thank you. Councillor Denyer?
Evening, I'm Carla Denyer. I am one of the councillors for Clifton Down Ward, which is the area around White Ladies Road. And just to say, my council laptop is playing up a little bit, so if my camera goes off, it's because it's running slow and I'm trying to stop it crashing, but I am still here.
So thank you for that. Thanks for warning us. Councillor Bales?
Hello, Councillor Bales for Withywood and Hartcliffe Ward, and I'm also a council tenant.
Thanks very much. And I've got Sam Robinson.
Yeah, hello, it's Sam Robinson, Energy and Renewables Manager, Bristol City Council Housing and Landlord Services.
Thank you very much. And I've got Civil CISO twice at the moment, so on my screen. Anyway, Civil CISO.
Yeah, it seems to be following me around. I'm a council tenant at Garrick House.
Thanks very much. Liz Cheetham.
Hello, Liz Cheetham, Engagement Team, Housing and Landlord Services.
Fantastic. And finally, Councillor Dud on the train.
Yeah, Councillor Collard, Housing Services. Yeah, apologies if I can't. I should have already been at my destination by now, so apologies.
No problem. Thanks for joining us anyway, and we understand the technological constraints of these things. Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody. And
if I can also just apologies, introduce myself as well.
Yeah,
Jeremy Divitt from Democratic Services Clerking Meeting.
Sure. So apologies, Jeremy. Yes. Okay. So moving on to apologies. Who have we got? That's we've got many people with us. We had a late apology from Councillor Dyer, but I'm not sure who else.
Yes, we've had a couple of apologies. Councillor Tony Dyer is one, and Richard Eddy as well. Fantastic.
Yeah. No, Councillor Dyer was taken ill, so I wasn't able to attend. So great, but most people are here, so that's fantastic. So moving on to the let's just to the minutes of the last meeting, taking the question of accuracy first. So is there anything from our last meeting back on the 4th of October, just in terms of accuracy, is there anything in the minutes that anybody wishes to put a question mark by or query? Or are we comfortable that's a fair record of the business of the day? Yeah. I'm not seeing anybody wishing to raise anything, so we'll take that as a fair record of where we were. Thank you for that. So we were listed as having item 3 is public forum. We were listed as having a public forum question. We had a communication in the last hour saying that the resident raising the issue didn't feel the need to come along. So we're just taking that as an issue being raised and noted. And I think it's raised an important question about the way in which this committee board communicates with tenants, and that's something which I know that we'll come on to later on when we're thinking about the future of the board. But his particular issue, his particular case is in hand, and I think Ben has been in touch with him so that that particular issue is being taken forward outside the meeting. Nigel, did you want to come in on that particular issue?
Yeah, there's no matters arising on the agenda because there's a number of things that are in the minutes of the last meeting that were to be done that haven't been done. I don't know whether that will be taken in the rolling actions log for Housing Management Board, but there seems to be no mechanism to check that what was said is going to be done on the previous meeting has been done.
It's actually under agenda item 4.
So I was going to say, so
what that is it? Okay.
Yeah, matters arising and rolling actions.
Then. Okay.
Yeah. So public forum item 3. I think we take that. We'll note the issue, and then we'll move on to 4, which is precisely the point that you're raising. So we've got a matters arising and a rolling log of issues that are still open. So I mean, Lesha, can I ask you to just walk us through the matters arising in the first instance and focusing on the ones where we're not, they haven't been closed off or whatever. And I think also particularly in terms of a number where the status is awaiting a response, I'm sure the committee would be, can you give us a feel for, when a response might be forthcoming, if you see what I mean? Is it a question of things need to happen before we can get to a response, or is it just a case of we're waiting for a response and it could be imminent, in which case we might be updated before the next meeting? Just walk us through where we are with the matters arising.
Okay. So evening everyone, I'm going to share screen so you can look at what I'm looking at. So this is so the reason why this is under item 4, matters arising and the rolling log, is because this is the first time that we've done a sort of collection of all the actions from the meeting in a rolling actions log. So it's to present the idea of having this log in the first place, but we can also address matters arising from the last meeting. So what we have got here is there was an action about a representative from the Housing Scrutiny Panel. Tim's here. I think Tim's first meeting was the last meeting, so there's no further action on that, and that remains in place. In terms of the Homes and Communities Board, Peter Dorr, who isn't here today, I don't believe, asked about the next meeting of the Homes and Communities Board, and Councillor Renhard took an action to ensure he was invited to the board. So what I can say is that I now do have the date of the next meeting, so I can contact Mr. Dorr and get his contact details so that he can receive the invites for that meeting, which is the next meeting, I believe, is the 14th of May. Don't know if you would like to add anything to that, Tom.
Yeah, just to add, I have written to the City Office to make sure he's included in invites going forward. It sounds like that's been picked up.
Okay, thank you. The next action point was about the social value assessment, and actually I think Sibususe said that he'd found out some of the answers to the questions himself anyway, to the query that he had about that. So I think this one is closed off now. I just want to make sure that that is the case.
Yes. Subsequently, however, in the last meetings, in regards to the reports from Gorham Homes, where they stated that the social value per home is roughly 30,000, and forecast on 3,000 homes that they'll be building. So I'm just trying to understand the consistency between the spin out of the council, because if Gorham Homes delivers social value, working with young people in apprenticeship, that's great. But you've also got on-site Bristol that is.
Oh dear.
No, I think we've lost Sibusise. Perhaps we could take that offline, and then if there's a further action for Councillor Renhard or I, we can.
Can you hear me, or is this breaking?
It was breaking up.
We lost you at the vital moment there, Sibusise, I'm afraid.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just saying that it seems like there's a separation of activities that actually could come together, because when you look at the social value that Gorham Homes produces per home, and them also hosting young people, and then you've also got on-site Bristol, which is part of the council, an external part, but it's part of the council. They deliver the same thing. So wouldn't it be easier that the social value around construction is delivered by on-site Bristol, and Gorham Homes can continue with the delivery of homes? So therefore it's easier to understand, or the collection of social values easily collected from one place, and therefore we understand the total impact of young people, apprenticeship, levy, and so forth from one provider, as opposed to, you know, the different elements of it. Because the breakdown that I was asking for in terms of the said 6 million contribution of social value from the council, I don't have a breakdown of that. I just understand much better and clearer what the social value outcome is of Gorham Homes.
Okay. Tom, did you want to come back on that?
Brief. I mean, it's probably best taking it offline, but what I would say though is we'd want Gorham Homes to carry on doing social value based activities as well as building homes, because one of the key things they're doing is running a skills academy in partnership with Countryside Partnerships up at the One Lot Lee site, which is the one that's on site at the moment. Obviously that's still had a huge amount of interest and engagement, and people taking up courses. We won't want to stop that activity, but perhaps it's best bottomed out online, because maybe the broader point there is just around kind of seeing the full kind of map of the activity that's happening around social value. So I'm happy to pick it up.
I think for our purposes today, I think let's say that there's a further question, and that Tom, can we leave that with you to follow up with Sibusise, and sort of if you want to unpack it a bit more and work out how that might evolve, can we do that? Thank you very much, Lesha. On to fire safety updates.
Okay, so fire safety updates. Mr. Varley, you put concerns about polystyrene, and you wanted us to give you assurances that we had taken action to make sure that the issues that happened at Gilton House around polystyrene on the buildings and the cladding were taken into account, learnt the lessons, and that there's new ways of working. So I was hoping for Craig to be here today, and he is due to attend, but unfortunately he can't attend until about 7:15. So if we have some time today, we can ask Craig for an update today, or separately we will ask Craig to write to you after this meeting. to confirm that.
Thanks, Lesha. So Nigel, you got your hand up. Do you want to come in now, or is it better to wait till Craig
no,
arrives?
I mean, there are a whole number of issues which I want to raise on the agenda item the item I asked to be put on the agenda. So we'll leave it till then. I'm finding it's a bit difficult to follow because the report you're giving, it would be useful in the future if you refer to the minute number, so we can actually find what the follow up is.
Okay, point taken. I'll take that on board, so we could do that. I'll update that next time.
Okay, but we'll just put a pin in that one for now and come back to it when Craig is with us. Mobility scooters.
Okay, so we had a discussion about mobility scooters, and we were in the process of implementing mobility scooter policy. There were some concerns from tenant reps about delays to the establishment of charging rooms, and at the time, Councillor Reynard confirmed that the programme of safe escape routes was already in place, but we were in the process of implementing mobility scooters. So Craig acknowledged that there was a city-wide response required, and any information available would be circulated to HMB. So I'm not aware that any information has been circulated to date. So again, I will ask Craig to after this meeting.
Tom, did you want to come in at that point?
It's just that I clocked the word. I think that should say policy, not programme. I think when I spoke about that the last meal, in fact, I signed off a safe escape routes policy, which includes
thank you.
To our approach to mobility scooters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll update that.
Investment in communal areas went outside the meeting.
So the response to this one, so I haven't been in touch with you directly, Nigel, but the response to that one is we are in the process of reviewing our environmental improvement policy. The aim of that review is to improve transparency and resident involvement. One of the policy officers in my team is leading on that, been speaking to residents at the Estate Management Service User Group and Housing Forum. She's due to come back with an update in the spring about how the tenants' views has been taken on board and how the policy will change in response to that.
So the message there is look out for the consultations starting relatively soon, spring, summer 2024.
Yeah, well, at least an update on how the residents' views that have been collected so far are being fed into that policy and how they're being listened to and how it's shaping that policy.
Oh, that's not the same as sorry, I've been invited to speak.
So I've got Philip first. Sorry, I've got Philip first, I think, and then you, Nigel. Philip, you're still on mute, Philip.
Sorry about that.
No, we're good.
I've been doing a bit of a stock take, if you like, and I've got minutes of the Housing Management Board from 2019. And I don't know how many times, and I'm trying to desperately find one, that we were going to have a consultation. There is, in 2020, I think it was, residents must be listened to and process introduced made it easier for residents to make contact with housing officers and other key council staff. Feedback identified a number of priorities, including the provision of local surgery and more opportunities to face-to-face contact. This was in 2020. In case anyone doesn't know, that's 5 years ago. So why are we having another load of nonsense? Because in 5 years' time, I'll bet it hasn't changed one iota.
Right,
Now,
okay.
people should keep these. And I've got one here, December 2020, that was, I've just quoted from. I don't know whether you can see it or not.
No.
Minute.
So I think one of the reasons, so your point is pertinent for sure. I think that one of the reasons for separating out some of these actions is precisely to to keep track of the follow up and that something is happening.
I'll bet Lesha's not here when the next one comes.
Well, we need assistance.
Retired.
So retired. Oh well, I'm not quite sure how to construe that one, but I think we need to get to the point where there's a system which is robust to those sorts of changes. So actually, what this is trying. Well,
I'm going to mute. I can't stop laughing.
Okay. Well, it's not.
So can I come in here?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So this is about the environmental improvement budget.
Yeah.
Mr. Morris has sent us an email asking about the update on estate walkabouts and estate inspections, which, you know, we have said we would carry out, and that would improve the invisibility of housing officers on the ground. So we've got two options. We can take that item under any other business because it's slightly separate but connected to the EIB policy, and or I have asked Fiona and my colleague Martin to do a response to that as well.
Okay.
So we will get a response, if not in this meeting, in writing to Mr. Morris about an update.
Okay. Well, let's say that it feels like there's a response. I mean, let's say there's a response direct to Philip about that outside the meeting, because if there are things that aren't being followed up, that there are different, as you rightly point out, Philip, there are different people now in roles, and maybe maybe that makes a big difference to this moving forwards. Nigel, did you want to come in?
Yeah,
on this specific issue about the
so I wasn't typing a response because the Titanic phrase "take on board" was mentioned. They take so much on board that everything sinks in the end. But I mean, there has to be proper discussion with tenants, not just some vague take on board. And not discussion, negotiation. So there's a negotiation between the tenants and the council on what the tenants want and what the council can afford and has the capacity to deliver, with a view to reaching agreement. Not the decisions being made, by officials, but a bit of mutuality in the process. And that's what we want. We want to say what our environment looks like. We're not what we want to say. We want, direct influence. The only thing that would limit what we want is the money that the council has.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I agree with that. As I said, what we're doing, so policy officer has gone to a group of residents already and asked for their views. She's working that into the policy to come back out to demonstrate how those views have been taken into account. And then that is what will shape the resulting policy. Within the policy itself, there is process for wider resident consultation. So if you're interested in being part of finding out how that policy is developing, how we're taking resident views into account, then by all means, I can ask her to make sure you're included in any correspondence or invites to meetings where that's going to be discussed.
Okay, so I think for purposes today, we just say, this needs to be meaningful in its substance rather than sort of performative. Okay, I'm conscious we should be moving on. Some of these things are on our agenda today, so we can keep moving.
Okay, so and then the last action from matters arising was that there was an action point for myself and Fiona to pick up feedback by Ben. It may be feedback through to our home ownership manager, actually, Julie McKay, just to give information about how it's going with the duty team on the right to buy and leasehold home ownership team.
Okay. And is there, what's the current state of play on that one then, in terms of bottoming out what was going on, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, so I mean, Fiona's here today. I don't know if you want to add anything,
I was going to come in if it's okay.
Of course, go for it.
So unless told otherwise, I'm aware that it's Julie Mackay, so the minutes do need to be corrected. So Julie Mackay is the manager of the leasehold team, but the home ownership service. And we have a route. She also manages and deals with the leasehold forum as well and chairs that meeting. There is a route for residents to now make contact directly with that team, so they've got their own duty service, and I believe that's working well unless told otherwise. So if we have any leaseholders that are able to express that that isn't the case, do let me know. But there is a process put in place that's been discussed at Leasehold Forum, I believe, and I believe it's working well now.
Is it Ben? Is there anything you want to come back on that?
I personally haven't tried calling. We have our next meeting in April, I think. So I'll bring it up there and see how people feel that's going.
Okay.
Thank you, Ben. That would be really helpful.
That's great.
And
Lesha.
I was going to say, and that concludes the matters arising that I picked up from the minutes, the action points from the last meeting.
And then we've got a series of open actions on the next couple of pages that we might want to just revisit. Most of those, I think, so some of them are items that are on the agenda. There's a suite of things which I think are related to the scooter issue. That item, I'm on page 4.
Yeah.
So we've got closed items A, closed items B, B2, situation is people with mobility scooters feel they need to be travel safe. Donald, report back on to the HMV, advise arrangements in place. So that
action will need to be rolled forward, and obviously Donald isn't able to.
Okay, so yeah, no, so I guess the point for today is, are we clear who somebody else needs to recognise it's open and needs to be picking up on Philip's previous point, so that it's robust to personnel change.
And so the point of the rolling log is so that we can keep a tab on the things that haven't been followed up. So as Mr. Morris said earlier, you know, there's times when we've said we are going to do something, and he's not always seen evidence that that's been done. And if we capture it in that log, it will help it to keep it on the agenda and help us make sure we circle back and cover off those action points.
Yeah, and then the next one's on the agenda for today, which is the district heating. We've got a question. You're posing us a question, which is about mobile CCTV cameras. It's currently open. Should it be closed?
Yeah. And so there was an ongoing action that remained open. It was an action at the time for Fiona from the July meeting last year, actually. So my query was, is this still an ongoing item, or does it need to be closed now? And it was about the provision of mobile CCTV cameras in areas where we've got properties.
So sorry, Nigel, would you mind if I just come in and respond before you speak? Is that okay? So I did investigate with the team around the use of a mobile CCTV option. It isn't something that BCC have used previously, and it isn't something that our ASB team would deploy naturally. We have instead relied on static cameras and cameras throughout the city. So I really struggled to get any further with that. And my challenge or my push really was to focus on trying to upgrade existing CCTV that we've got across our blocks and our estates, because we know that we have some issues there as well. So unless colleagues, members around the table say they would like me to continue to push that further forward, which I'm happy to do, as it wasn't a sort of standard activity within Bristol. It felt something that I was struggling to get traction on, shall we say.
Thanks, Fiona. So I've got Nigel and then Philip.
I've got a whole number of things to query, but that means we spend the entire meeting on matters arising. Yes. The point I want to raise is the question of compensation for extra heating costs arising out of the removal of insulating cladding. My understanding is that there is £150,000 in the budget for this. Guildhall House have been pushing this, haven't been officially told. I've only found that out from the press. But there are a whole number of questions about this sum of money. Is it for all 38 blocks over the 10-year programme of cladding replacement? If so, each flat will get hardly anything. How is it going to be paid? Is it going to be a grant? Is it going to be a rent reduction? Do you have to present your electricity bills? All of these methods have particular problems, and when it's going to be paid. I mean, we're getting bills in now. I mean, I've worked out that I've spent an extra over 500 quid on electricity over the past year. So these things need to be clarified. We were due, the Gilton House Tenants Association Committee were due to meet the Mayor, Councillor Dudd and Craig Cook last week, but the meeting was postponed because of Barton House. We haven't been able to meet Tom Renhard, but you know, these questions need to be answered urgently.
Can I just pause you on that one? I mean, that seems to me to be a perfectly sensible set of questions, which are any other business, if you like, or they're not. Can we close off the CCTV conversation? Does anybody object to parking and closing off the CCTV mobile? So, Philip, you want to come in on that particular issue? While you're still on mute, Philip. You're still on mute.
There we are.
Right.
The CCTV is a problem. In East Street, there are two static cameras.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot monitor traffic in a pedestrian zone because, and I have it in writing from the council, they're not antisocial behaviour cameras. Now, antisocial behaviour is when antisocial behaviour happens when a person feels threatened, abused, or intimidated. Now, as a wheelchair user, I was hit by a car in East Street between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. when it's a pedestrian zone. The bus companies, even our council, have been and put a big red piece of tarmac down and put buses only. Well, every four-seater car must be a bus because there's 15 an hour going down there at least. But the council will not use those cameras because they're antisocial behaviour cameras, not traffic cameras. So the council, again, a silo working, as we used to call it. And as for mobile cameras, go and talk to Community Art, or maybe I won't name him because I don't want to embarrass him. There is a person here who used to work in Barton Hill, and he may well remember the mobile cameras that Community Heart bought and gave to the council. So they have used them very successfully. The thing is, a lot of these council officers weren't around in 2000, 2004, 2005. And so they don't know about the mobile cameras. Thank you.
Okay. So is that an argument for keeping it live as an issue, or is it a point we note for now?
Well, for what it's worth, I just note it.
Okay, let's note it for now.
We've got to get on.
Yeah, let's note it for now. So the issue that Nigel raised about budgets, the hands went up on that one. Tom, did you want to, and Kyle, did you want to come in response to that particular point and close that one off?
Yeah, just to say the budget that we're talking about was only agreed about 4 hours ago, so there is £150,000 in the budget to cover that issue that Nigel raises. So it's obviously in there for this year, but I think the intention is that obviously this is subject to other budgets being passed, that it would be in there for as long as the roll-in programme in terms of cladding removal is going on, just to cover the exact issue that Nigel's talking about, the issue where works take longer than they're expected to, and people face higher bills. In terms of how that works, will it be a flat fee? Will you have to prove the amount of energy that you've used in excess? Then we're still working on that, so we don't have the answers, but hopefully we'll have them soon. But the money has been agreed in the budget for that particular, to deal with that purpose.
Can I ask that you consult with tenants on that? Because there are all sorts of problems with each way of paying the money. And certainly at Gilton House, our experience, I think, would be valuable to you. I mean, if that £150,000 is for Gilton House alone, then that's fine, we'll take it. But I don't think
Well, let's not get too far down that track. So it's something that's emerging. The point about consultation is well made, so keep hold of that one. The point about adequacy, we're not going to settle now. So I think maybe we should note it and move on. Ben, did you want to come in on either of these two things?
Yeah, I just want to ask, maybe I've missed something, but what are the benefits, Fiona, of the mobile CCTV, which we'd be getting if that was a priority?
Yeah, so, my experience elsewhere is that I worked somewhere where we used mobile CCTV, and we used mobile CCTV because we didn't have static. We didn't have sort of high-rise blocks in the same way, and the sort of static cameras that we have. The benefit of a mobile device is that you deploy them in response to a particular issue. So if you've got a resident or a leaseholder or a customer that expresses concern with a specific issue around ASB, you may well deploy it to try and capture evidence. So, for instance, we would deploy it. Sometimes we used to use a covert CCTV, which we may put in a hallway to capture vandalism or damage that's being, that one resident is perpetrating against another, to capture evidence. So it can be extremely useful and is quite well used. But I would say a lot of housing associations use them because they don't have any other solution. So they couldn't tell if somebody entered a building or not. We generally wouldn't have CCTV. We'd only use deployable.
Tom, did you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, so thank you. So there's a couple of things on the CCTV. I think it'd be probably really useful if there was an update circulated to Housing Management Board just on progress with the programme. Just the people who are aware of where things got to. So that was the thing I was going to say. I think the mobile stuff can be quite useful because once people know where static cameras are, of course, then they may well kind of commit acts of crime or ASB not in front of them, right? So having mobile as well could have its use. But just to build on Councillor Dudd's point around kind of cladding, sort of cladding removal support button, is what's in the budget is £150,000 a year for the 30-year business plan. Obviously, it may not be needed beyond the 10-year cladding removal programme. But what it's been described as is there's a total budget to support tenants of £500,000, of which 350,000 goes into our local crisis prevention fund for council tenants at the moment. And it's as much of that 150,000 as is needed to go towards that kind of cladding removal funding support, and any balance would then be used for other initiatives to support tenants. Was how it had been designed by Councillor Dudd and myself. So it'll be full blocks that are having cladding removal, but it's a per year figure, just to assure you, Nigel. And I think the points and the questions you've raised are all very good ones and things that need to be thought about. My reflection would be, though, that we want to perhaps learn from the scheme that there was nationally to support people with bills when the energy crisis happened, and look at what worked well and what didn't work well with that. Because what we don't want to do is design an overly complicated scheme that's really hard to administer. So I think but I think it's crucial that tenants are involved in that process, and that's really, really important. That's what I wanted to add to just what Councillor.
Thank you, Tom. I've got.
Can I just ask how many blocks of flats have been done already and are planned to be done in the next financial year? Do you know?
Question for Craig, probably as the cabinet briefs have changed now. I'm not as close to that detail as I was.
So can we'll hold on to that question. So how many blocks is it influencing? So Councillor Dudd, did you want to come in on that one, or should we move on? I'm conscious we very much need to move on. But if you've got a comment, on that
Craig will be able to confirm that. So yeah, I think it's best that we move on.
Okay, thank you. So there's a number of other open actions which I am going to take as simply about awaiting responses. We note that they need to be progressed, and you've captured them. So I suggest we move on to item 4. No, from item 4 to item 5, which is the update on Barton House. So Fiona, are you going to take that one just to talk us through?
I actually wasn't. It was Craig was going to give you an update because he was going to take you through the sort of technical.
Right. Okay.
Stuff. I could fake it, but I don't think I'll do a very.
So the alternative is to switch it around and take Sam's item on energy strategy next.
Would it be helpful if I give a quick summary of the technical?
Yeah, Mars
is that okay?
Yeah,
would that be helpful?
Absolutely. If you can. So there's a presentation which you've seen, no doubt.
Yeah, well, I've been quite close to it, working alongside Craig. So, in summary, I'll steer away from the sort of tenancy side of things, which I'm sure Fiona can just provide a quick update on when I finish on the technical side of things. So, essentially, we've reached a point of agreement, or we did reach a point of agreement with the 2 consultancy groups who were working on the project to satisfy the sort of wide working group that the building was, with the remedial work that was proposed, was completed and would be safe to return to, or reach that standard of that high standard of safety that would allay the concerns that were sort of came about from the investigation process. So essentially, this has comprised 2 major sort of work programs. One is to improve the fire protection to steel framing within the flats that was fitted in the 1970s, following the explosion of Ronan Point in 1969. And that's been completed to approximately 40 flats in the sort of critical areas of the building that have been identified as sort of paramount importance in the structural engineers report. And the second is to install a simultaneous evacuation alarm throughout the properties in Barton House, which is primarily there to overcome the increased risks that are posed or were posed by the cladding system, and to mitigate any risk, to change that evacuation policy for that building to one of simultaneous evacuation. So that work's been completed and was completed last Monday on the 19th, I think, and has been commissioned and certified and tested, reviewed by our in-house building safety team. And yeah, so it's that's been accompanied with another sort of slightly more program, another slightly smaller program of work, but nonetheless just as important, of Legionella testing, which was required simply by virtue of the fact that a number of the properties have been, unoccupied for a length of time, that recommended that, in terms of good practice, recommended for testing for Legionella in the water systems. So that's been completed, and the building has been reoccupied. So I'll just let Fiona touch on the tenancy side of things.
Please do, Fiona. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I can confirm that yes, the building is mainly fully reoccupied. We've got at least 70 residents that have returned that we were expecting to return. We've got a number of residents who we were just waiting for the kind of final Legionella testing to be done, and with whom we're already in contact with, and they should be returning on Friday. We have some residents as well that are in what we call our serviced accommodation. So hotel accommodation wasn't felt quite appropriate for them for various reasons, usually family size and sometimes issues, ill health with children and things. So those individuals were put in ICAP accommodation, so serviced apartments. And again, those arrangements will come to an end on Friday, and those individuals will be returning to their homes. So, I mean, the team have done extraordinary amounts of work, really working with our residents. As you can imagine, logistically, it's been very difficult. It's been very, very difficult for residents to be displaced from their homes, and we absolutely understand that. But it's also been quite challenging making sure that we're getting the right trades in residents' homes at the right time. What is really positive, and that something we really wanted to thank all residents for, was we've had some challenges, but generally collaboration's been exceptional, because we have managed to get in every single home. So every single resident has allowed us to access their home to carry out differing degrees of work. And for some residents, it's been quite challenging in terms of the amounts of work we've had to do. It's meant, a lot of movement in the home, damage to wallpaper and things. So in order to do the works, we've had to have a lot of collaboration, and residents have been excellent. So we put in place a number of activities really to support residents in their return. So things like we've carried out welcome visits so that residents can come and meet the team and review their homes with the housing officer and somebody from our maintenance team to come and look at the properties and look at if is there any outstanding works or damage that they need to look at. We also then will give a promise certificate, so which the maintenance teams will issue. So having looked around the property and captured any outstanding maintenance that we want to do for them, we will give a commitment and a promise when that will be completed. In addition to that, we found that it was necessary to give DEX vouchers, decoration vouchers to residents. So where we've done some of the work in people's homes, where we bagged up areas to stop sort of dust and things from travelling around residents' homes, we found that at times that would sort of damage wallpaper and paint when you remove it. So it was only right that we need to return our residents' homes back into the condition that they were in before we started the works. So we've ensured that we came up with a range of options, actually 3 different options to meet the different needs of each resident. So we've either given DEX vouchers where they can then go to B&Q and buy paint and wallpaper of their choosing to decorate themselves. Or we've said, okay, you can get the DEX voucher, go and choose your wallpaper paints, colours to your choice, and we commit to doing the decorating for you. And or some residents have had the third option, which was that we will do the decorating, but we always use magnolia. So a lot of residents don't want a plain magnolia in their home. So that's why we've given that 3-tier of choice. In addition to that, we've also had to make sure that we had a number of residents, of course, they've been displaced, they've not been in their homes, and so therefore key meters have run out. So that's meant that for many residents, their fridges and fridge freezer content has been ruined. And we've seen that firsthand ourselves as officers. So what we then arranged to do was we had again a 3-tier compensation level where we give vouchers for Tesco so that residents can go and restock their fridges and get themselves back into the position they were in before they were displaced from their homes. So I think we've tried to respond appropriately. We've also covered floor covering for residents, either carpeting to replace carpet that might have been damaged and or hard flooring if that was of their choice or of their choosing. So I think the key for us has been about providing a different offer for different residents, because we're not all the same, and it's everyone's home is their personal environment, and people will have a different standard, different choices. So we try to accommodate that.
Thanks, Fiona, for that detailed update. And got a comment from Councillor Bales there, the decorating. It sounds amazing. So I've got Nigel, I've got 3 waiting. I've got Nigel first, I've got Councillor Denyer, and then I've got Philip. Nigel?
The first thing is not to underestimate the distress and anger amongst a significant proportion of the tenants at Barton House. I know it's been put about this is all whipped up by outside agitators from Nasty Acorn, but I mean, I've had contact with people there, and there was genuine anger and distress about what's happened there. The second point I want to make is that there have been media reports that structural issues at Barton House were flagged up a long time before this crisis developed, and that had the council had the capacity, and I'll use these words carefully, had the council had the capacity to take these up, it might have avoided the emergency sort of panic stations that occurred. And the lesson is for the council is not to ignore advance warning, because in the end it will cost you far more.
So I'm going to let Miles answer the second part of that, but the first part I will respond by saying I absolutely do not underestimate the strength of feeling from a number of residents around the fear of returning. I say that because I, day in, day out, have dealt with that strength of feeling. So it's not something I underestimate, Nigel. I absolutely do understand it and have been on that journey along with residents. And we do still have some residents that remain really distressed and feel unable to return. And as I say, again, because we have to treat everyone as an individual and listen to individuals' concerns, we have some residents for who feel unable to return, and we're dealing with that through our processes and the way that we can allocate homes through our homelessness route. So that is ongoing for those individuals as well. So it isn't, I think the key is for me personally and for my teams is to treat people as individuals and not have a one-stock answer in terms of, you know, our response to residents. But I do think it is also important to say, whilst we've had that strength of feeling, that initial upset and the uncertainty with return, which we can understand, the vast majority of residents have made the decision to return, and all residents, even those that have said that they feel too frightened to return, have all collaborated with us and have been great in allowing us access to their homes. So even those individuals that feel that they don't want to return have allowed us to access their homes to carry out repairs. And that's, I think, a really positive message for all residents. And I try to ensure that the message isn't just a negative one, because, you know, residents, even those that feel concerned about returning, have been really supportive.
But you're not going to declare anybody intentionally homeless then?
We're not using the term intentionally homeless. So there's a lot in the press around this intentionally homeless, and that isn't something I've heard colleagues in the homeless team use. So homeless colleagues are dealing with individuals, and they will address that and on each case as an individual case, and they're dealing with that at the moment.
That needs to be made clear.
Okay.
Thank you, Nigel.
That's helpful.
So there's a second part to that. I'll let Miles answer that.
I was just about to say, Miles, did you want to come in on the anticipatory governance question?
Absolutely, but I've also noticed that John Smith, the executive director, has got his hand up, so I wondered whether he wanted to come in before I did.
Was it on that point, John, or something else?
It was, Alex, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd just like to add generally, if that's okay, quickly to what Fiona said. So we do absolutely understand how disruptive moving people out of their homes overnight was, and that goes, you know, and it has had an impact, and it clearly has, and we completely accept that. And Fiona and myself and the team have been working very hard to try and work with residents to support that. But I appreciate, you know, what happened that night happened, and you know, it's been very difficult to move back on from that. In terms of the decision making at the various different points, which I think was at the heart of Nigel's question, we've tried to be transparent about that, Nigel. So we have uploaded onto the Barton House website a narrative timeline which describes what decisions were made at which points, and also the reports that we had at that point. So, you know, without going into the detail of that, people can review what we knew when and the decisions that we made at that point, and the advice we had to make those decisions. But your point generally about you know, making timely investment decisions about infrastructure is obviously a good one, and you know, we do have a lot of financial challenges, but that is the approach we are trying to take where we can.
Could I just ask then that the reports in Bristol Cable were incorrect?
I don't know which report you're talking to, Nigel. But
well, the report,
the information
the council knew a long time, about 2 years. I think it's 2 years previously, about the structural problems.
Well, the information that we knew at which point is in the what I'm saying is in the information that we've made available on the website. So you can, you know, you can judge for yourselves. We can provide a link to it as follow up to this, Alex, if that's helpful. But it is all there.
Please do. Yes, that would be helpful. Yes. Councillor Denny has been waiting patiently to come in as the next question. Do you want to come in at that point?
Yeah, thank you. And that was a good question to come before me because it set the scene. My question was about the mental health of some of the residents of Barton House. So absolutely noting what you've said, Fiona, that the majority of residents are okay to go back. Yeah, I know that there is still a sort of fairly significant number of people who aren't, and are mostly that's because of bad mental health that has been brought about or exacerbated by the evacuation and the situation since. And I wanted to understand whether the council has any duty of care for especially under 18s suffering mental health issues as a result of the incident, and then more generally what the council is doing to support those. I met some of them recently, and you know, I think we'd all heard the one sentence headline about there are people with mental health issues, but it's one thing to hear that sentence and it's another to meet the teenagers that haven't been eating, you know. So it is, I think it is quite serious, and it would be good to hear what the council's doing to support them.
So who would like to respond to that, Fiona or Paul?
I think John probably wants to
respond. John,
Yeah, I don't mind starting off, Alex, and Fiona can obviously come in. So thank you, Councillor. Yeah, as I said before, we don't underestimate that, and we have met ourselves with residents in large-scale groups, as you know, and heard those concerns and fears ourselves directly, and in smaller groups as well between us, throughout the process. We have provided mental health support from a couple of agencies, Nilari and Somali Resource Centre, to try and support residents. In terms of under 18s, we've particularly been working with the schools to provide support throughout the process to them. I'm not trying in any way to take away from what you're saying, because we've had Fiona and I and your team, Fiona, have met much more regularly than I have. I wouldn't, I have met some residents directly myself, but I mean, I have heard those stories themselves, and it is very difficult. But that's what we're doing. We have made that support available. We continue to, as Fiona said, tailor the support that we've got to the individuals and the particular issues that are being raised. But as I said, primarily in terms of under 18s, working closely with schools.
Thank you very much. Thanks, John. Councillor Denny, is that? Oh, hand's gone. Okay, fine. So which we move on? I think we've got Philip, and then we've got Ben. So Philip next.
Hello.
Hi.
I'd like to thank Fiona for what she said. It shows that for once the council are listening to people. I lived in Barton Hill for 15 years. I know lots of people in Barton House, as I used to help run the resident group in Barton Hill. And I think I was there yesterday, and the residents I spoke to, some of them, who Fiona will know, never left. And they're very grateful for the decorating that has been done, because they had, the lady I was speaking to had asbestos removed, which they didn't know was there. So I think it's very good what they've done. There are always people, I mean, if you won £1 million, someone would complain that it wasn't £1.5 million. But, I think praise where praise is. And Bristol City Council have come out of this with some good merit. So thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Philip. And Ben.
Yeah, I just want to touch on leaseholders. I don't know if there are any leaseholders in Barton House. No, there are no leaseholders. Okay, fine. In that case, scrap my question.
Okay. Any other comments or questions anybody wants to raise in relation to that update about Barton House, or are we good to move on? Now, has Craig joined us yet? Is the question. I'm sorry, doesn't look like it at the moment. We're running a little bit. I was going to say we're running a bit ahead of time, but that can't surely be true. Slightly ahead of when he's joining us. Put it that way. So can I suggest we reorder and take Sam next to keep moving? Is that okay? So we've got an energy strategy update that we'll take next, and then Craig will come in. Sorry, Fiona.
I'm sorry, Alex. I'm just conscious because I was planning on leaving quite shortly, but I wanted to make sure, because I know that there was the question around the neighbourhood and estate grading, and I didn't want to miss that. I can take it off and deal with it with Philip separately if you'd prefer, but I'm happy to give a sort of outline response at this time. It depends what everybody would want. Yeah, shall I carry on?
Yeah, let's have a quick outline response to Philip's point about concentration. Yes.
Yeah, I think residents, you were right to raise it. You're absolutely right. So I've come out and we've talked about the neighbourhood and estate grading work and the visibility of housing officers out and about on our estates and within the patch. And it is something, that I have personally really pushed for since joining BCC. I think it's really important. I think it's something we should be doing, and we should be out and about on our estates and understand our residents and engage with them far more. So we put in place this piece of work, which was our neighbourhood and estate grading work in late 22. But as some of you will know, it was rather challenging. So there was the resistance just generally within the service. And then once we were able to get through that, because of staff's workload and a change of way of working. We just come out of COVID, so I think people had changed generally the way that they were working. So we got through that, and then we found initially that we were really struggling with things like IT and our systems to capture and evidence the activities that we were doing. And then finally, we struggled with the services that we receive from other parts of BCC, the things that are important to residents, which things around grass cutting and bulky waste removal, and the challenges internally that we were trying to get through in order to make sure that we could respond appropriately when residents had raised things. And then finally, this is where the neighbourhood and estates and the NIB and EIB, which was the environmental improvement bids, and that money comes in, how we access that more readily and allow residents to have a voice in that actually absolutely fits in this piece of work. So we really did struggle. So some housing officers continue to do that work, but we're being pulled from pillar to post, and we weren't doing it consistently. And we absolutely haven't been able to record that and present that back out to residents. What I need to get to is a position where it's on our website and where residents and stakeholders can see very clearly the dates of our walkabouts, and you understand what that schedule should look like. What I need you to know is that that isn't lost, and that work will continue. So I now have 2 new housing managers within that service. So we were struggling with resource and structure. So I think some of you will know that we had a review of service, and out of that review of service came the need to increase the resource, the management function within our tenancy management service from 1 housing manager to 2. We've increased the service from 6 team leaders to 7, and we've introduced 3 new officers whose specific role is to deal with our more vulnerable residents, those residents that have very high needs and who we found were taking up a disproportionate amount of the housing officer's time, so that they therefore weren't able to offer the type of service to the rest of our residents that we needed to. And that involves those activities, those proactive activities like neighbourhood and estate walkabouts and gradings. So we've done all of that work, so that I know it hasn't seemed perfect, but we've been doing stuff in the background to get ourselves into a position where I had the right structure and the right resource to be able to deliver this in a more proactive way. We're also fully staffed. So, there were issues, as some of you will know, with resourcing around the numbers of housing officers. We're fully staffed and we remain so. We're keeping completely on top of that. We intend to relaunch the neighbourhood and estate grading at the beginning of April, start of our financial year. The first thing officers will do, they will go out and regrade their neighbourhoods and estates for the frequency of their walkabouts, and then they will start to engage with yourselves as stakeholders and councillors to invite them to the walkabouts. And my third activity is to make sure that that's recorded within our systems, so that residents can quite easily see when a walkabout is going to be happening. So I just wanted to offer that reassurance and to thank you really for raising it, because it's important to me. I think it is what officers need to be doing for residents.
Thank you, Fiona, for that thorough overview. Philip, does that address some of the questions you raised earlier on?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Fiona. Thank you. The only thing I would raise about it, I was reading through I've read all the minutes from 2019, and my head's going around. But according to the minutes I read, which I will copy and send to Fiona and to you, Alex, is that on the 3rd Thursday of each month, there is a clinic in Withywood where housing officers meet residents, but it's never been advertised. And last month I went down there on the 3rd Thursday. The one thing it doesn't say is where in Withywood it is. And Withywood is rather a large area.
Indeed.
But I will
send it. So what I would say is, yeah, interesting. I didn't know about that. And if we said we were doing it in 2019, I'm not sure that they are still doing it in a proactive manner. And the third thing that I would say is, as you say, there's no point in doing it somewhere without promoting it to residents. I mean, we've got some of our resident engagement team here. They might know something that I don't, but that is something I think I'm happy to take away for you that we will have captured, I'm sure, in the minutes, and I'll find out if that is happening and make sure that we are promoting it appropriately.
Thanks. Yeah, so yes, we'll keep hold of that. You don't need. We'll keep hold of that in the minutes, Philip, and they'll be tracked now. So we'll have that, and we're considering creating the new role of Housing Management Board official historian. So, Civil Caesar, do you want to come back in there at that point, or have you frozen just at the?
Oh,
Civil Caesar, are you with us? You got your hand up?
Yes. Sorry,
carry on.
My internet drops.
Yeah, no worries.
Fiona, I'd just like to put a hand out for support, because over the last few years, that's really been some of the work that we've been doing in terms of supporting communities with neighborhood planning. However, when you do neighborhood planning and you don't know the strategic objectives of the council, and we work in collaborations with communities, the university to create these, then that becomes a missing piece in the block. So where we have done a piece of work, like in St. Paul's, we didn't have as much community development support. So it's just community led. So there was gaps in that planning in terms of how that would link with council. When we did something in Hotwells and we had a community development liaison involved and a structural architect involved, what we did actually got implemented. So it shows the difference of really coordinating some of these stuff with the council. And when you don't coordinate them with the council, it doesn't move things forward. So this whole grading of estates and you having more staff, potentially that means that in areas where we see less neighborhood planning documentation or community plans, hopefully that will link with the council, and therefore that improves your own efficiency in terms of the mobile CCTV cameras. If there's community projects and they're really looking at antisocial behavior, crime, they could link and put those things and show you through what the community sees as a lens to say, we would prefer it here. So it actually meets all consultations at a single point, as opposed to having separate engagements about the same thing in one community. So yeah, if that's something that you are looking at doing, we happy to kind of support. We're doing that. We've just finished one in Hotwells and we'll be starting one in Central.
Can I take that as a comment and say thank you for that offer?
Thank you very much for that offer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks for that. So it looks like Craig has just joined us. So Sam, I think we'll maybe revert to the original agenda. So Craig, if we may move on to the next item, you're straight into the hot seat of item 6, which is the accessibility and implementation of fire risk assessments, which was raised by Nigel. So would you like to kick us off on that one?
Can I, if I ask the agenda, can I introduce it to see what my concerns are so that Craig can respond?
Yep.
Would that be a better way of doing it?
Yep.
Sorry, just to jump in, I think I'm responding on that point. Is that your understanding, Craig?
Yeah, I thought I was doing Barton Ice, so
yeah,
thank you.
You seem to have swapped places.
Right. Okay. So this is a good. Well, in that case, Nigel, briefly set out your concerns, and then we can decide who feels best able to field it. Yeah.
Right. The law requires that blocks of housing have fire risk assessments done every year, and that these be made publicly available, and problems that are identified or risks that are identified by the assessment be made known to tenants. We managed to get hold of the fire risk assessment that was done in May 2023. We got it through a back door. One of our tenants got hold of it. I don't know how, and he won't tell me, because the link to fire risk assessments on the council website doesn't work. And when you contact the email address that's on there, you get a standard, thank you for your inquiry, it will be dealt with, blah, blah, blah. You don't get anything in return. I haven't had anything now for about 2 months since I applied officially for the fire risk assessment. And I know it's Chris Evans, is it one of the blocks in Henbury? He's had a run-in because he's been trying to get hold of it, of his fire risk assessment. He's been told they can't release it because it needs redacting to remove things that might be in breach of the Data Protection Act, which sounds a load of nonsense to me. Now, I've got a concern about getting hold of these things because they should be freely available and they should be proactively communicated to residents. But what is more of concern is what is in the fire risk assessment for Gilton House. And I want to make the point that Gilton House can't be an exception. These problems must exist for other blocks if we've got them. Gilton House failed on 47% of the criteria that were judged by the inspector. All sorts of things failed, like no regular checking, no personal evacuation plans, no staff training, no refuge points, obstructions on escape routes. But what concerns me most is that the fire doors and the doors to flats weren't compliant. This means that they're not flame and smoke proof for 30 minutes, which is required. And that brings into question the council's policy of stay put. Because in the event of a fire, the policy is that residents should stay put. But if the fire doors aren't flame and smoke resistant, that is a very serious matter. And at the end of the conclusion of the Gilton House fire risk assessment is that we are moderately at risk of injury or death. Now, there are 3 scales: slight risk, moderate risk, and extreme risk. I would think that a block of housing, of sheltered housing for the over 60s, shouldn't be moderate. It should be, you can never eliminate all risk. But for that to occur is a very serious situation. And I've been through the fire safety regulations for 2022 and 23. And there are all sorts of problems as I identified with our block. And as I say, if they're in our block, they must be in others. And it is a criminal offence not to comply with fire safety regulations. And should anybody suffer injury or death because of a problem that was notified in the fire risk assessment and not acted upon, and the council has 6 months to act on these things. I was told at a meeting that all these things have been logged and were acted on, but none of them had within the November deadline. Well, you know, somebody, the responsible person who was Donald Graham, but now is presumably is Mr. Smith, will be guilty of, criminal negligence. It's a very serious matter, very serious indeed. I think, it could blow up if there was another fire. And don't forget, the fire risk is still there. We've got that what happened in Valencia. We've still got the majority of multi-storey blocks with inflammable cladding on. And now we've got an internal fire problem because the fire risk assessments are being withheld or suppressed and not dealt with. And I think something as a matter of urgency needs to be done about that.
If I may, I think, John, could I ask you to maybe begin the response to that?
I'm sorry, just to jump in, I'm probably best placed to give
that's fine. You go ahead and,
okay?
and I'll come in afterwards. Yeah, that's fine.
So just on the first point, Nigel, the redaction issue, the data protection issue with the FRAs is something that we have been very strongly advised from our data protection team to follow. So, we're fully aware of our obligations under the legislation to ensure that these documents are readily and freely available. And
can I just come back on that, Craig, because this fire risk assessment for us was done in May 2023. We have plenty of time to redact anything that is non-compliant with data protection.
So, as I was going to say, we were having a full program of these completed across all of our blocks, and this is a new style of fire risk assessment that was introduced last year that contains this information that could identify residents who are doing things which might compromise the safety of the building. For example, mobility scooters parked outside of flats where the flat entrance doors are visible and the numbers visible. And it's actually a very labour intensive process for which we have no dedicated resource yet within the service to go through redacting all of these fire risk assessments to a point where they can be released. So we fully understand our obligations under the Act, and that is something that we are looking at how we resource and can actually take forward, so we can get to a point where the FRAs can be uploaded onto the website and people can be free to download them and access them as they see fit. The second point on the outstanding risks, again, this relates to the new style of these FRAs that are being completed to satisfy the requirements of the Act, and we're fully aware of the issues that we've got across the estate. I think it's fair to say that it's in keeping with the spirit of the legislation. It's a more forensic and more detailed approach to assessing the fire risk in these buildings, and from this we're looking at ways that we can strategically manage these risks and also comply with the relevant areas that we need to. For example, the flat entrance doors, and specifically the annual checks to flat entrance doors that need to be completed. So we are I think it's fair to say we're working to catch up with this, and that is a key priority for the service area I look after, which covers off the building safety team, but also Craig's area as well. We're working very closely now to take these compliance issues of which fire safety and compliance with the fire safety regulations, and addressing the remedial actions from these fire risk assessments. Is really one of our number one, if not our number one, focus to work towards now. So, I appreciate that's not perhaps the detailed answer you were looking for, but hopefully that's a good summary.
Thank you, Miles. John.
It still comes down to the fact that the council at the moment is non-compliant, which places council officers at risk should anything happen. And we really need now to sort of have timetables of when the issue is going to be addressed. Now, it's easy enough to start ranting and raving about Bristol City Council being useless. I actually don't blame the council. I blame the Conservative government for its withholding money from local councils so that you can't afford to fulfil your legal obligations. But nevertheless, you have to carry the can should something go wrong. And we're likely to be faced with another emergency, just like the emergency in the eastern blocks that caught fire, when suddenly you have to strip the inflammable cladding off every block, which is going to cost millions. Then you have the emergency at Barton House. You have to move away from this reacting to emergencies. And if you can't do something, well, make it clear to the public, make it clear to the tenants. They have to be extra careful because we can't deal with the risks that have been identified in your block.
I think the point is forcefully made. John, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I do. So thank you, Nigel. I mean, you make some very good and some very fair points. We, as Miles has set out, complying with the building safety regulations and the new requirements of the FRA and the ongoing requirements as well is an absolute priority. I meet with Miles and our newly set up building safety team weekly to run through the issues and to prioritise them. You're right to flag the issue of council funding. It has been a challenge, but we are prioritising it, and we will. We know how important it is for people. And you're right. I am both the responsible person and the principal accountable person now, actually. So I'm acutely aware of that, as you would imagine. So, I'm afraid that's all we can say, really. We're aware of the obligations that we have to meet. We have some work to do to get where we'd like to be. We're prioritising it as much as we can within the resources.
Okay.
Any idea of timetable?
Yeah, we are working on that. And when we have various things that we've already done, and we're working on further elements of it. So I'm sure we can share our future timetable as we develop it, Miles, can't we? So I'm sure that'll be
fun. So I think perhaps what it might be useful to provide some context to, Nigel, is that we're setting up a bespoke working group to tackle this issue directly. So we're not looking to resource and manage this within our day-to-day delivery and management teams. So hopefully that it can give some indication of how we're treating it and how seriously we're treating it, and we're recognizing that it is a specific work stream in its own right. So that's moving at pace now, I think it's fair to say. And as a working group that we're sort of coordinating within my service area, we're meeting at least weekly now, and in terms of individual sort of elements of that, several times a week. but I'm hoping that by the end of March, we'll have some more detail on the timelines that are going to accompany specific work strands around this.
Okay, so why don't we why don't we take up John's offer and say, well, and if it was possible to share a timeline when it becomes available, or as that develops, so that tenants have some assurance about the rate of progress, then maybe that's as far as we can get today on this particular point. I think that would be. Philip, did you want to come in on this particular point? Because I'm conscious we need to.
Yeah, just a quick thing. First of all, Nigel, the fire in Valencia was clad in aluminium, not polystyrene.
No, it wasn't. There's polystyrene in there.
Let's not debate that here. Yeah.
Anyway, point I was going to make is that I did a freedom of information to Avon and Somerset Fire Brigade after the last meeting. It took them weeks to answer, but our cladding, which is polystyrene covered with these brick slips, is called F2, and it is non-flammable. As the lady who answered the email stated, Eccleston House, the only thing that burnt in Eccleston House was the sofa and the propellant. Once the propellant had burnt out, the fire went out, and all polystyrene does is smoke and smoulder. And according to the fire brigade, no one has been killed in a fire in the city and county of Bristol in 20 years. Those that have died have fallen from a block of a flat that was on fire, or have been killed in the fire by smoke inhalation caused by mobile barbecues, candles catching fire, or whatever. And I was a resident in Corbett House when the poor girl in 24 was murdered. And the only reason we knew there was a fire in her flat was when the window blew out. And the council just waiting for a reply from the government asking if Bristol City Council's application for funding will be met for this cladding, because I doubt if it will.
Okay.
Bristol may well follow the lines of Birmingham and be bankrupt by this useless cladding removal.
I have to profoundly disagree with Philip on that, but we're not going to get into an argument. Can I just conclude by saying that while I think the councillors present on this meeting ought to be very concerned about this issue, and while I understand the response, I'd like it logged that noted that I don't accept it.
Okay.
I certainly don't accept what Philip said.
Well, that's a separate
debate.
It's not really relevant for this particular meeting. I think your points are made forcefully. They've been noted. You've had an update on what the council's doing, and I think we've had an undertaking to update the members of the board as the thinking evolves.
I want it admitted that I don't accept the response. Okay. I understand it, but I don't accept it.
Okay. Well, let's. I think fine. Well, let's minute that, and but I'm conscious we need to leave it there because we've got about half an hour left, and we've still got a couple of big items to engage in and something about the review of the board. So can Sam, if that's okay, Miles and John, move on. Sam, energy strategy.
Yeah. Hello.
Okay. Thank you for waiting patiently.
No, that's all right. Couple of false starts. You had me on my toes, Alex. I'll just share my screen. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Oh.
It's coming now, I think. Yeah, we're there.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I came to talk to you, nice to see you all again. I came to talk to you all towards the middle of last year, I think it was, and set out that I was developing an energy efficiency strategy to cover off what we're looking to do to improve the energy efficiency of our homes. And so having taken that to Cabinet early this month, it's a good time to come back and give everyone an update on where we are in terms of next steps. So the plan went to Cabinet in, well, actually the early part of February, the HRA business plan, and that agreed £64 million for energy efficiency works up to March 2031. So you recall previously there was 80 million identified in the business plan in the previous years. So that's effectively the balance of that less money spent on existing projects, which I'll come to in a minute. And obviously we're continuously looking at grant funding opportunities, and we're anticipating a further big sort of SHDF grant funding bid likely in autumn of this year, but not confirmed by central government yet. So as I said, the strategy went to Cabinet on 6th of February, and it sets out our approach to reaching EPCC across all BCC homes. So you'll remember that was a commitment made as part of the One City strategies. So I'll run through this as I come through the slides, but broadly what we've set out is that we'll expand our programme of deep retrofit. So what I mean by that is homes that need kind of the most major and expensive interventions to reach EPCC. We'll also, for other homes, introduce what we're calling a light retrofit programme. So that's for properties that perhaps don't need those major interventions, but need kind of lower cost measures to reach the standard that we'd like. We're also going to begin installing solar PV alongside our cyclical roof replacement programme where it's technically feasible to do so, and I'll cover more on that in a minute, as well as developing an approach to reduce bills and improve EPC ratings for homes with night storage heaters, which tend to be sort of a big driver of high heating and hot water bills. So I'll just go to the next slide. Is this big enough for people to see, by the way, the slides? You're on mute, Alex. If you're
well, you put it on full screen. Put it on full screen.
Hang on. Sorry, I thought I'd done that. Where am I?
That's full screen now. Yeah.
Is that full screen now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So just to review where we are with current projects, we've got an established pipeline of around 600 properties. So that includes 112 easy form flats in Stockwood and Knoll area. This is kind of deep retrofit, major interventions like new windows, solid wall insulation, loft insulation. Several high-rise blocks on the programme, including Little Cross House, which is pictured, Frankham Underdown and Waring in the Redcliffe area as well, and 7 low-rise blocks at the Ledbury Road site in Ponds, and so sort of touched on the measures there. And the budget for that includes the 9.1 million of grant funding that we were awarded via the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. So continuing that programme, one of the things we set out in the strategy was the need to kind of go further with that programme. So we've got several thousand homes which are either solid wall or kind of or non-standard construction, preform concrete, which tend to be worst in terms of thermal performance. And many of those properties, so that can be, you know, high-rise blocks, medium-rise, low-rise blocks, flats in houses. And many of those homes are below EPCC because of the poor thermal performance of the building fabric, the walls, because heat escapes quite readily through the walls. So those are the ones we're going to sort of proposing to target for the highest level of investment, that deep retrofit approach. So we'll look to upgrade windows, doors, roofs, external wall insulation, modern mechanical ventilation, heat recovery systems. So that the hope is that that'll improve the thermal comfort of buildings in summer as well as in winter, lower energy bills, reduce carbon emissions, and obviously improve internal air quality as well, and sort of get those buildings and homes clean heat ready, I suppose, for that eventual transition to kind of lower temperature, low carbon heating. So we're also looking at a light retrofit programme, which I touched on just now. We estimate that of sort of homes below the EPC standard, around 4,000 to 5,000 are only sort of marginally below that standard by sort of 1 to 3 points. And so those homes tend not to need such major interventions to reach the standard we'd like. Instead, we can sort of improve them through lower cost measures. So that's things like draft proofing and lowering energy bills, reducing emissions, but it's sort of a broader offer that we can afford and take out to the high number of homes, so still sort of 7,000 to 8,000 at the moment below EPCC, we think. On solar PV, our energy efficiency strategy has made a commitment that we'll begin installing, so retrofitting solar panels onto existing roofs, and we plan to do that alongside our existing cyclical roof replacement programme. So this would be sort of from April 2025, we think, wherever we're replacing a roof, we'll always look to install solar PV as well, where it's technically feasible to do so. There will always be some roofs where it's not, either because the yield would be very low, there might be shading, it might be, the panels might not be oriented in the right direction, or because, for some communal roofs, it can be more complicated as well. So we'll have to make that assessment of, is this roof feasible, and where it is, we'll put the panels on. So over the next 12 months, we'll kind of finalise the spec for what panels and inverters and things we want to put on, and identify that delivery model. And then, like I said, from April 2025, move into delivery. And then sort of final point, just touched on at the start, but direct electric heating and hot water, we know it's a real big driver of fuel poverty, of high bills. So you'll be aware already that we're currently, I think, in year 2 or 3 of a 10-year programme of upgrading the older style night storage heaters to sort of more modern quantum high heat retention equivalents. From April 2024, we're going to go a bit further, and we'll also be upgrading the hot water cylinders as well and replacing them. Instead of a cylinder, we'll plan to use a sort of thermal storage unit that we call them sun amps. I think other brands might be available, but basically it looks like this instead of like this, so a lot smaller. Lots of advantages in terms of performance. Those they don't store water, they basically store heat in what's called a phase change material. So cold mains water runs through them and picks up that heat. They can store the heat for a lot longer than a hot water cylinder, I think around 3 to 4 times as long. So much cheaper, because once it's hot, it stays hot for longer, unlike a cylinder where the water might cool down the following day. And because it's mains pressure cold water that goes through them, it will mean mains pressure hot water as well, which I think will be a big improvement for anyone who's got potentially an old style cylinder in their home. Also, big advantages in terms of repairs and maintenance. We talked a bit about Legionella earlier, but we have to visit once a year for Legionella inspections, and because we're not storing hot water in these, no need to do that either. So less disruption and cost there as well. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of I've picked out some of the key bits that I thought were in the, I'll just stop sharing a sec. We're in the energy efficiency strategy. There's more besides, and it's publicly available. Obviously, it's gone through Cabinet, so it's on the website should you wish to read it yourselves. But yeah, happy to take any questions if people have them.
Colleagues, questions? Ben?
Hi, I was just wondering on 2 points, really. One is, will sort of be a classical leaseholder one, is that this is going to be large costs, at least for things like solar PV, retrofitting, insulation. And I was wondering how much of that, is that just being shared with the leaseholders, those costs? And is it being taken into consideration that often that's one massive cost in one go for leaseholders rather than...
So specific to PV, I guess that's a bit of an easier one, because I just think it would be more straightforwardly that, well, communal roofs are a challenge anyway. So putting aside large blocks, which often aren't going to be suitable for having solar PV on the roof, if it was, say, 2 flats in a semi-detached house and one was a leaseholder, I think it would just be that the BCC resident would benefit from the electricity generated, because ultimately those are the homes that we're trying to drive improved energy performance on. For other stuff, that I think your point applies much more to stuff like external wall insulation systems, for example, where clearly in a large block you can't insulate only the flats that are BCC residents. The system would fail. You'd have cold bridging, so you have to insulate the whole building. I'm not an expert on recharging policy to leaseholders, and I'm not sure that anyone on the call is. What I do know is that where there's grant funding available, that is available to leaseholders as well, so that can help meet the cost. And as far as I'm aware, for things that aren't deemed essential repairs, and I think an external wall insulation system would fall into that category. So it's a nice to have. It will definitely lower people's bills, improve the thermal performance of the building, but it's not being done to shore up the structural integrity of the building, if you like. That we don't recharge for that anyway, but I think we should note an action to check that, because I would like someone who's involved with recharging leaseholders for works to confirm it.
I think that's a good suggestion, Sam. I think what we'll do is we'll pick that up with as there was another query raised for Julie McKay, the leasehold manager. We'll pick that query up and get those out with the minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, great, thanks.
And it'd be, yes, and you've got your meeting, Ben, on the 14th of May, is that right? Did you say earlier on?
Yeah, that's with Leaseholder Forum, yeah.
Yes, so whether there's something about recharging that could be, because I'm sure questions, as this becomes known publicly, there'll be questions arising at that forum, I guess, that maybe that's a target date for having some clarity that you could share. So that'd be great, thank you. So we'll minute that. Philip and then Sibusiso. You're on mute, Philip.
Sorry about that. I would query what Sam just said about high-rise blocks not benefiting from solar panels. This block of flats is 3 stories high. We have 74 lamps lit 24 hours a day because we have internal communal corridor on each floor, 4 floors. Well, 1 floor has got no flats on it, leads to the car park. So I would question, our roof is east to west, northeast to southwest, sorry, east to west roughly. So panels would fit very easily, and you can angle the panel. If the roof is the wrong way, you can angle it. We've got a very long roof, unlike Gilton or Northfield, which are square blocks, and we're a long block, so we could fit easily. Like Barton House, everyone's aware of Barton House. Barton House has a long roof. It has external walkways, but the Ashmead is a long roof. You know,
okay. So why don't we?
There is a long roof. So solar PVC, as you're calling them, would fit quite well and would cut the council's electricity bill.
So Philip, so Sam, just hold on to that one. Subasisa, do you want to ask a question on that? Because I think then we'll move on to Richard's item. So Subasisa, you've got a question on that?
Yes, just a question from residents in regards to the current damp and mold and the potential of these schemes supporting them with external wall cladding on the basis that these are the properties that have got an external wall within our block. So is it that these schemes have got a targeted ward specific part? Because we always find that within Hotwells, it's normally an area that's classed as there's no height deprivation, but yet there's a number of council homes there. So I just wanted to check, is there an area-based thing with how this will be delivered, or is this delivered based on needs?
Now, unless I'm mistaken, Sam seems to have just disappeared.
Yeah, I'll cover it.
Okay, so Miles, go for it.
Yeah, that's Sam works within my service areas. So essentially, what we're looking to devise from the strategy is to target the worst performing properties first, and align that with the properties where we can get the most gains in terms of energy efficiency representative to the investment.
Sorry.
So I think. Sorry, Sam's back. I was just asking, answering Sibusiso's question about whether these will be geographically sort of delivered, and just summarising that we're going to essentially be looking at the data and targeting the worst performing properties first. I think it's probably likely that a lot of these will be in similar geographical areas, just by virtue of the fact that that's the way development has proceeded, but it's not a given. So,
okay. So keep hold of the point, I guess, and maybe there's another conversation to be had about that. So Sam, did you want to take this issue of flat roofs briefly, or blocks? And
I can, yeah. I mean, so taking the example of Barton House, for example, but I think the point I was really making is that in high density buildings like that, you tend to have a small amount of roof space for a large amount of people. So even if you could connect the solar array to individual flats, people might not necessarily see that much benefit anyway. And there's a secondary question about how those blocks tend to be wired and whether that is physically possible to install a system that benefits individual meter points. So then you...
Right. So Sam seized up again there, but let's just take it as an observation that it's not a blanket refusal to consider blocks. It's a question of feasibility and the sort of calculations that go with it to work out whether it's worth doing. I think, is that right? So it's not a blanket saying we're never going to do it. It's a, does it work? When would it work? When would it be inappropriate? I'm going to let Councillor Denyer, because I really want to move on because we really need to talk about the next item. So Councillor Denyer, do you want to just have a comment at that point and then we'll move on?
Thank you. I'm kind of wearing my former hat as a renewables engineer more than my current councillor one, but totally get that if you divide the fairly small roof space of somewhere like Barton House by how many flats that is, it's not going to be much per property. But wouldn't it be worth putting solar panels on the roof for the electricity used in the common parts of the building, which must be quite substantial for taller buildings?
So I think that's an interesting question. You've got lifts for buildings that have lifts, and then communal lighting. I think where there's lifts, that we should probably explore it more. Where it's communal lighting only, I think what you would end up doing in effect is exporting most of that generation back to the grid at not a very good rate, and then you start to question whether the capital investment was a good one, given how else you might have spent that money. But lift is an interesting point, I think. But then once there are other challenges about putting a solar array on a tall building like that.
So again, it's not an in principle no. It's a but does it work and does it stack up? Sounds like that's where we're at. Yeah. Okay. I'm very conscious that we really the board needs to hear from Richard. It really does need to hear from Richard during the time we're together in terms of what's coming in terms of regulation. So I really think at that point we ought to move on, Richard, and talk us through what the board needs to know about the consumer standards and its implications maybe for us.
Great, thank you. I've just noticed my title said head of business development. That's not the case. That's Miles. I'm acting as a asset consultant now. So I'll just share my screen. How long do I have to do this presentation?
Well, we've got about 10 minutes till the meeting is due to finish at this rate. So you have got 6 or 7 minutes, perhaps.
6 or 7 minutes. Okay.
Not a lot, I'm afraid.
No, that's fine. Okay, so it might be a bit of whistle stop, and if I need to come back to another meeting, that's absolutely fine. Right? Can everyone see that?
Not yet.
Does it come through now?
No.
No. It's coming on my screen. Hold on a sec.
Yes, now we're going.
Brilliant. We have it now. Right. I'm just putting on to presentation. There we go. Can everyone still see that okay?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I've come to give you an overview of social housing regulation and changes to social housing regulation and the consumer standards and some work that we're currently doing to understand our position against that. So just a bit of background to start with. So things are changing significantly and rapidly in social housing regulation. The Social Housing Regulation Act brings significant changes to the way that the sector will be regulated, and a stronger, more proactive consumer regulation will be a large part of that. That's going to impact on local authorities significantly, who haven't been subject to a proactive regulatory regime in recent years. So housing associations have been subject to a proactive regulatory regime of sorts, not as much as it is going to be now, but they have. Local authorities haven't as much, which means there's going to be a real step change for organisations like Bristol. The Regulators of Social Housing is revising its consumer standards. These, along with the tenant satisfaction measures, will be the backbone of that regulatory regime that will be coming. There's also the regulatory landscape. We'll have the Housing Ombudsman within it, who is taking quite a bit more, taking a lot more of a robust role within regulation, and also the building safety regulator, which is very focused on the outputs of the Fire Safety Act and the Building Safety Act. So appointment of health, safety and consumer standards leads. So part of the requirements will be that all social landlords must appoint a number of named people. I won't go through these in detail because we're short on time, but just to say that there's going to be a number of named people covering health and safety, building safety, but also complaints and consumer regulation matters. And Bristol, over the next month and a half, will be making clear who those named people are and giving contact details to residents to be able to contact them directly. Okay. The enhanced consumer standards means that there's going to be a much more proactive approach to regulation from the regulator of social housing, allowing intervention in various cases of landlords that are performing poorly against the consumer standards. There's quite a bit of information that I've put some hyperlinks in here, which people can go away in their leisure and have a look at. But I would very much advise people to have a look at the tenant satisfaction measures, but also looking at the consultation on the consumer standards. So the consumer standards, the revised consumer standards, are currently out to consultation, but I think we know, I'll come in a minute to a couple of slides which will cover these in more detail. We're pretty confident that we know what the new consumer standards are going to be, which will be implemented from April 24. So not very long away at all. I'll just go to the next slide. In response to the changes in the regulatory environment, but also the implementation of the new consumer standards, we have appointed a consultancy company called Savills, who are undertaking a critical friend review for us against the existing consumer standards, but also looking at what the new consumer standards are likely to be. The aim is to help us identify where we are against those consumer standards, including strengths, but also weaknesses. Savills will help us to they've completed an initial data review, and they've also met with a lot of colleagues from across Bristol City Council to understand the position, and they did that within February. As part of the review, Savills are going to provide us with an evidence map showing evidence of where we are complying with the consumer standards, but also where there are gaps and where we need to strengthen our position. And these all form action plans. I think it's fair to say when we have these details, we will be coming back to the board to give you an update of where we are and actually show the journey of where areas for improvement have been identified, how we're going to respond to that, and what that sort of roadmap looks like. I won't go through these in too much detail because of time, but just to say what the current consumer standards are listed in each of these boxes, but also in the brackets are the changes to the consumer standards which we're expecting to be implemented in April. And each of these boxes sort of list out what the regulator will be looking at in each of those areas. So there's some more there looking at a neighbourhood standard and also the tenancy standard. And very much the tenant satisfaction measures, which we have to start reporting on performance against those tenant satisfaction measures from the end of this year. So we need to have submitted our figures to the regulator by June, but it'll be based on performance at the end of March. So empowered regulator of social housing. As part of the Social Housing Regulatory Act, the regulator will be given the power to routinely inspect social landlords, and they'll be doing this on a cyclical basis, generally a 4-yearly basis. The regulator of social housing is at the moment prioritising social landlords to come and inspect based on a risk-based approach. So larger landlords will come first. Landlords with a more complex property portfolio will also be higher up that list. So they're very much looking to focus it, and I think Bristol can expect the regulator to come and do an inspection in the early part of the programme. We suspect, because of our size and because of the complexity of our homes. We have quite a number of high-rise blocks, for example. Okay, I think this might be my last slide, but just to give you sort of some context about how we're getting ready for regulatory inspection. Just got some key dates here about what we have been doing. So in January, we started to look at the landlord compliance data review that was undertaken, but also looking at the consumer standards. So in February, we're getting an idea of what's going to come out of that, and we're expecting the findings reports to come in, the draft reports to come in early-ish March, early to mid-March, and then really in April we'll be looking to make sure we're responding to the new regulatory regime and the new consumer standards that are being put into place. Okay.
Richard, thank you very much for that very clear overview. If you don't mind, Orphy, I'm going to take that as an overview and move us on, because we've got about a minute left, and I don't want to. And if you'll allow us to run a couple of minutes over, I would just like the one item we haven't touched on yet is the future of this board. So I just quite like a couple of minutes, and I don't want to, if you'll indulge me, to run for a minute or two over at 8 o'clock before we bring ourselves to a close. So Lesha, do you want to say just a quick word or two about, I don't know if it's yourself or Liz, what's happening with this board in the BCC movable feast of governance?
Okay, thank you. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to share slides because we don't have time for that. But what you have been given is a slide deck that proposes some changes to terms of reference and a way forward in terms of reviewing the Housing Management Board. What I'd like to, I guess, propose is that that this board agrees in principle that we can get on and start reviewing elements of the board, updating those terms of reference, with the caveat that by the time this board next meets, we will have a new administration and a new council committee system. So there will no longer be a mayor, an elected mayor of the council. And we will no longer be sitting with a cabinet member as we know it at the moment. What we will have instead is a housing committee and there will be a chair of that committee, and I assume a vice chair of that committee as well. And so between now and the elections and our next meeting, there's going to be quite a lot of change. We're also waiting for an appointment of a new interim director or permanent director, whichever way that goes. So there's quite a lot of change happening within our leadership. So what Liz and I have put together a sort of plan for the way forward, and we just wanted to get some endorsement from the board about moving forward with elements of that update to terms of reference, with a view to ratifying that in full and exploring that in full at our next meeting once we know how the elections have gone, how that committee is going to be set up. We're still learning about that ourselves as members of staff, and what that means for this board and the influence of residents in decision making at the highest level. And how does that position this board in a new committee structure? So that's a conversation that we need to have internally ourselves, so that we understand that as well. So that we can come back to this board when we next meet to have a more fuller discussion. And I would request that it's a main item on the agenda, because we often have been sort of overrun, so not really had time to discuss this in the meeting. And that's my request. And just to follow up from Richard's point, anyone who wants to know more about the social housing regulator, the housing ombudsman, and building safety, and what that all means, particularly resident board members, I would be happy to offer a separate session for resident board members, and I would urge you to look at the training offers that come out from the tenant engagement team, because they often send out free training opportunities so that you can get up to speed on what the regulator's doing, what the role is for residents within that. Because certainly if they're going to be inspecting us into the future, sometimes they'll want to talk to people like yourselves and ask for your feedback. So those are my 2 points.
Thank you, Lesha. That's really clear. Just one thing, just one further comment. Just on your next step slide, you talk about workshops with resident board members to report back to the HMB. Are those going to be happening between now and our next meeting?
If we can, I think what we need to do is, as officers, we sort of need to understand how the land lies a little bit, and then be able to engage with residents. What I wouldn't want to do is preempt what's going to happen, agree something with residents that then we have to retract on. So if you could give us a little bit of grace to sort of get ourselves up to speed, that would be really helpful.
So in terms of colleagues looking at these, the slide deck, in terms of calls on their time or invitations to participate, they maybe shouldn't expect anything until something's clarified around the election and the new committee system and how the HMB fits into that broader structure, and then there's a conversation to be had. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that's the sort of timescale we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. So we must finish. I must say, firstly, I'd like to say thanks to everybody for their presentations, and then thanks to everybody for their questions. And then we'll just finish by saying, is there any other business that anybody would like to raise at this stage? I've got Lesha and
I have one.
Lesha first.
So just to notify the board, obviously we don't have a date for the next meeting as yet. It will be after the election, so I think we're likely looking at around June, but we will reach out to members of the board and agree a date once things have settled down and we know, who's going to be attending the board from sort of councillor representation. And the other thing, of course, is we would normally have a conversation about the chair of the board, and thank you to Alex for chairing us this year. I'd like to propose that the resident members have a conversation outside of this meeting about the chairing of the board and whether we would like to invite, Alex to give the opportunity to chair again next year. We won't have time to do that today, but if it's okay, I'd like to do that offline and sort of communicate with residents by email and
do that.
Hopefully get back in touch with you, Alex.
And if people need to go because we're over time, I understand that, but know, absolutely. And so I got two I got Ben, so I got Philip and Ben. Brief. Any other business?
At the last meeting we had, Bristol City Council Housing Revenue Account Grounds Maintenance Service Level Agreement was presented. At the last meeting, it's here.
Okay.
You can see it.
Yep.
The groundsman, Richard, and I can't remember his name, knows nothing about it.
Okay.
All these recommendations that Arcadis with consultant, it must have cost some money, but nobody's presented it to the groundsman. When I asked him if it was been implemented, he didn't know what I was talking about.
Right. Thank you, Philip. I'll take that as an observation and an action, and maybe we can get hold of that, and somebody can review where that is. Thank you for raising it, Ben.
I was going to ask very quickly if on these board packs for future iterations of the meeting, is there any chance on the first slide that it can just be written what it is you want from the Housing Management Board on this? Exactly what you're looking for from us.
Okay, so can we keep hold of that, because it goes back to some of those things about terms of reference and where you fit into the governance, the broader governance structure. So what sort of feedback is helpful? Where does it go? Okay, absolutely. So making sure everybody is clear exactly what the game is that we're in here. Yes, point well made. Should we keep hold of that? If there any other business, if not, I'll say thank you very much, everybody, and thanks for your contributions. And the Housing Management Board will continue, hopefully after the election. Whether I'm here or not is a different matter. That's up to you guys. So cheers and have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.